Thank you, Mr. President. I want to talk for a few minutes again about S1 by Senator Rubio. And as I've cautioned the last two times I've spoken on this subject, nothing I say is meant to be construed as a criticism of Senator Rubio. There's some really good things in this bill, as you know, Mr. President. S1, I forget the title of it here. It's, I think Marco's calling it the Strengthening America's Security in the Middle East Act. I like the fact that S1 reaffirms our commitment to protecting Israel. I think that's important. I think Israel is certainly our best friend in the Middle East and one of our best friends in the world. Sometimes, some days, I think Israel's our only friend in the world. S1 is going to strengthen America's bonds with Jordan, and I think that's very important. Jordan has been a key ally in fighting terrorism and a key ally, frankly, in helping us deal with the humanitarian catastrophe as a result of Assad and his butchering of his own people in Syria. S1 is going to combat a radical economic warfare campaign against our friend Israel. That's long overdue. And S1 is also going to create new sanctions on the government of Syria. And I support all of those. I intend to vote for S1, Mr. President, despite the fact that, in my opinion, there is a great deficiency with S1. I know Senator McConnell offered an amendment to reflect the will of the Senate with respect to whether or not America ought to get out of Syria. And he suggested in his amendment that we should not. I voted against Senator McConnell's amendment, not because I think he's wrong, but because I just don't know if he's right. And I don't think most members of Congress know. We have received such conflicting information. And I've asked Senator McConnell to hold a briefing for us, classified briefing, where we bring over people who think we should get out and people who think we shouldn't get out. And let us hear the facts, and let us hear the informed opinions of people who know better than we do. And frankly, I'd like to see us do the same thing with respect to Afghanistan. I share the President's concern about nation building. We've only spent, $6 trillion since 2001 in the Middle East. I share the President's concern about mission creep. But once again, just as I'm not saying that Senator McConnell's wrong, I just don't know that he's right. Quite frankly, I'm saying the same thing with respect to President Trump. I'm not saying he's wrong about withdrawing from Syria. I'm just saying I don't know if he's right. But I do know this. President Trump's going to do what he thinks is best for America. And the Senate can pass all the bills and resolutions about the will of the Senate that it wants to. But if the President of the United States thinks it's best for the American people and the world to withdraw all troops from Syria, then my experience is, by God, he's going to do it. If he does it, one of my biggest concerns, which could have been addressed in this bill, if we'd have been allowed to offer amendments like supposedly the world's greatest deliberative body, if we'd been able to offer amendments, we could have fixed this problem. And the problem I'm talking about is the Syrian Kurds. Now, let's just call it like it is. I mentioned Israel has been a great ally in Jordan, and this bill is being sold as well. This is to protect our allies in the Middle East, in part. What about the Syrian Kurds? There are 50 or 60 million, I think, Kurds throughout the world. They're mostly in in Turkey and Iran and Iraq, and they're in Syria. Why aren't the Kurds allowed to self-determine? And even if the Kurds didn't believe in democracy, and I think they do, they want sovereignty like we have. They want to be able to self-determine. The truth of the matter is we wouldn't have beaten back ISIS without the help of the Syrian Kurds. And I don't want to get off into this discussion about whether ISIS is defeated or not. If you look at just the statistics, a couple of years ago, there were 100,000 ISIS jihadists. They're not 100,000 now. They're less than 5,000. A couple of years ago, ISIS had its own caliphate. They just went in there and carved out their own country. They don't have it anymore. So you can debate whether we've defeated them. I'm not sure we will ever completely defeat the jihadists, whether they call themselves ISIS or Al-Qaeda or what. But I know this much: we could not have beaten back ISIS without the help of the Syrian Kurds. And a lot of our other friends, they were saying, yeah, you go get them. You go fight. We'll be glad to hold your coat while you fight. Not the Syrian Kurds. They got in there with us. And the Syrian Kurds have enemies in this world. I'm not making any accusations or disparaging comments about our friends in Turkey. But President Erdogan's been very vocal about how he feels about the Kurds, including but not limited to the Syrian Kurds. And I worry about them if we leave. So I had an amendment that simply said it didn't require anybody to do anything. It just said, Mr. President, if we leave Syria, this will give you the authority to keep our friends, our allies, the Syrian Kurds, from being butchered, from being opened up like a soft peanut. Because America's foreign policy has never been just about interests. It's been about values. America's foreign policy has always had a moral component. And part of a moral component in our foreign policy is that we don't leave our friends behind. And that's what we're potentially doing in this bill. And it could have been easily fixed. It could have been fixed if the Senate had been allowed to be the United States Senate. I don't hate anyone, Mr. President. I love and respect all of my colleagues, and I mean that, even the jerks. Everybody in their own way is special in this body, and I've gotten to know all of them, and I'm so proud to be a member. But it does bother me sometimes, Mr. President. It seems like we're kind of like, it's almost Orwellian. We're all equal, but some of us are more equal than others. And I think that hurts the American people. And I think had we been able to offer amendments, we could have fixed that problem with the Syrian Kurds. And I hope I don't have to come back and say, I told you so. I hope after we leave Syria, and I think the president is going to leave Syria, I hope the Syrian Kurds are just fine. I hope they're just fine. But if they're not, I hope we won't look back and say, you know, we had a chance to protect our friends and do the right thing, and we didn't do it. Mr. President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.